Hey, Sean, how are you?
Good to talk to you both.
Good to talk to you, Sean.
Good to talk with you, Sean.
All right, so first, Pat, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Mr. Felt and this huge, heroic revelation yesterday?
I think Mr. Felt is Linda Tripp without the moral courage. Here's a guy sitting there in the FBI. He violates his code. He violates his oath. He breaks the law. He engages in systematic law breaking to help a newspaper bring down a president of the United States. I think his actions were dishonorable, and the fact that Mr. Felt, for 30 years, lied about what he did tells me he was ashamed of what he did. I do believe this, that he ought to at least share that Pulitzer Prize with the Washington Post.
Well, why do you think he's being held up as a hero, Pat?
Because the guy he helped to damage and wound was Richard Nixon, whom the establishment was trying to destroy. You know, Sean, but you go back there in that 1972 year, Nixon had defeated all of his enemies who had been trying to bring him down since the Hiss case. The economy was moving well. We were bringing our guys home from Vietnam with honor. The POWs were on the way home. They would do anything to destroy this guy, and they went along and colluded with someone breaking the law over at the FBI, someone who had been involved in the whole black bag operation over there, and they were delighted to do it, and they consider him a hero because of the enemy they were bringing down, Richard Milhouse Nixon.
You had felt, Pat, that it was Mark Felt. He was at the top of your list of the people you thought would deep throat for years, but there's a reason why you didn't state it publicly. Why?
Well, because I always felt that Deep Throat was a snake. Deep Throat was disloyal. Deep Throat was dishonorable. You don't take the king's shilling and then turn on the king. You don't work for a man like Richard Nixon, who was good to me and good to a tremendous number of people, and then turn on them when they're in trouble. So I felt first that whoever Deep Throat is, he is not a loyalist. Second, he's got to have some information that nobody else had, and it pointed to Mark Felt. I did not want to mention Felt's name, even though I believed it, because I felt that would be slanderous against him, even if it turned out to be untrue.
Yeah. G. Gordon Liddy, what are your thoughts on this big revelation yesterday?
Okay, well, first of all, I think Pat is absolutely right. If he was disloyal, and he did the wrong thing. He was a law enforcement official. And according to his oath of office and the ethics of law enforcement people, if he believed that he had some evidence of wrongdoing, obstruction of justice, or whatever, he was duty-bound to go to the United States Attorney and go to the grand jury and seek an indictment for whoever the guilty parties were. He did not do that. He instead selectively dribbled it out to a young guy who was a Metro reporter for and it had been there only 9 months. I don't know why he chose Woodward for that, but he did. But what he did was wrong. He knew it was wrong. If you read that article in Vanity Fair, he didn't want to go public because he knew that it was a dishonorable thing. He was pushed into it. Now that he's a doddering old man whose mind is half gone, 91 years old, he's pushed into it by his family who wants the money.
Tell us how you really feel, G. Gordon. And by the way, the U.S. Attorney, was proceeding. The legal process was proceeding at that particular point. You know what's amazing about this, too? Putting aside that Felt had access to all those FBI investigative, all that information relating to Watergate, and as a lawyer, as a top official, he had a sworn duty to keep that information confidential and not interfere with the investigation, and he should have gone to any officials if he had any information, and he instead leaked it to the president's enemies, Bob Woodward and the Washington Post, etc. Most people forgot Patrick J. Buchanan. Few news agencies reported, isn't this the same Felt that had acted in other ways that call his so-called hero status into action? Isn't this the same guy that authorized the illegal search of offices of these radical left-wing organizations opposed to the war?
Yeah, this is the same Mark Felt. I mean, they're portraying him as Saint Mark, but this is the fellow who was involved in what was called the COINTEL program, which ran black bag jobs, unwarranted searches of radicals and weathermen, And he got caught up in that whole thing. He got indicted and convicted, and Ronald Reagan pardoned him. And what disgusts me a little bit, Sean, is I came out in strong defense of Mark Felt when that happened, when all those FBI agents were standing on that courthouse down there in Manhattan, 300 of them when he was convicted and came out. I urged the pardon. I said, look, these guys, at this point, we're fighting to protect our security from internal terrorists and thugs and criminals, and they did these things in good conscience, not for personal gain. And then to find out that because he was passed over for director, and because he was bitter, and because he was sucking up to the Washington Post, I mean, he's ratting out my own president, who had honored him with the #2 post over there. I find it really offensive, but you know, the man is, as Gordon is right, the man is past the age when we ought to be probably criticizing him or attacking him or his families.
Yeah.
But I do resent the fact that you get these folks, journalists on television, say, wasn't this guy a hero, when he lacked the courage of Linda Tripp, who at least stood up and said, I'm the one.
You know, I can assure you, too, Pat, that's just a great point. Our audience agrees with you, Pat. If the FBI had leaked damaging information against Bill Clinton or John Kennedy, the same liberal establishment that loves this guy, worships this guy, and adores this guy, Felt, we can predict would have been reacting very differently, no?
Listen, you're exactly right. Two quick examples.
Yeah.
Hoover knew that John F. Kennedy, because he had wiretaps on Giancana and the Mafia, was sharing a woman with Sam Giancana, Judith Exner. Now, if he had gone to the Chicago Tribune and slipped this stuff secretly, that would have been dishonorable. He would have destroyed Kennedy's chance for the presidency. Same situation. Suppose the head of the FBI had the dope on John Kerry, on the Swift boat stuff, and could prove certain Swift boat claims, and dropped it to the press, the Washington Times, 2 weeks before the election, and sank Kerry. The Washington Post would be on them. There'd be demands for investigation, send these guys to prison. These secret police are terrible. You know, it's simply because they were after Nixon, whom they hated with such a passion, that they tolerated the kind of injustices and outrage they condemn in every other case.
G. Gordon, how many years did you spend in prison over this issue?
Just about 5. But let me tell you, I was in there longer than we were in the Second World War, Sean. But let me tell you what is the supreme irony. Mark Felt, as #2 man of the FBI, knew what Watergate was really all about. And yet he either did not tell Woodward, or if he did, Woodward chose not to publish it. What it was about, of course, was the fact that the FBI was investigating a call girl ring across the street from the DNC in the Watergate complex. The FBI established a link between the call girl ring and the DNC. They described the link as a woman who was either a secretary or administrative assistant. The device that was on the phone was found by the Democrats in the DNC, and they found it on the phone of Ida Maxwell Wells, who was the administrative assistant of R. Spencer Oliver. The telephoto camera was pointed right at her desk. The men were captured at her desk, not over by Lawrence O'Brien. There was never any device found anywhere near Lawrence O'Brien. The photographic equipment was set up on that desk, and one of the Cubans who was arrested had a key. The FBI found that the key was to the desk of Ida Maxwell Wells. Now, how would John Dean, who was running this operation, recruited me for it, how would he know about this? Well, he knew about it because his then paramour, Maureen Elizabeth Owen Kane Biner, when she wasn't shacked up with John, was the sometime roommate of the madam, whose name was Heidi Reichand. All this is known to the FBI. And when John Dean realized this, because it came out in the papers, he demanded that assistant United States attorney come to the White House, bring the books that had been seized from the lawyer who was accused of running it. And there was, Biner's name. And he attempted to keep the books. He was not allowed to do so, so he Xeroxed them. All of this is known and would have been known to Mark Felt, but either he didn't tell Woodward, or Woodward was told and never published it. That's the big irony. The big irony is the public does not know what Watergate was all about.
You could have, and I'm running out of time here, G. Gordon, but you could have saved your own skin if you told them what they wanted to hear, which wasn't the truth. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. They came to me on a regular basis and said, "You can go home tonight, Liddy."
Yeah, but you chose to stay in jail with Bubba.
Well, Bubba never bothered me.
I'm kidding.
If Bubba
but
had bothered me, that would have been the end of Bubba, and he Bubba knew it.
All right, Patrick J. Buchanan, G. Gordon Liddy, two great guys. It's always a pleasure to speak to you both. Thanks for shedding some light on this. We appreciate it. And our fans, your fans in Texas, appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.